Thank you. Just a few words about myself. I used to work in the financial industry for 8 years, many years ago. I got out a long time ago, so you can still trust me. Then I worked in fintech for 19 years, both very conservative businesses. Now I work in CustomerGauge. I've been there for 3.5 years. I'm learning. So today is Friday, casual Friday, so I'm wearing blue instead of black. So it explains a little bit about me. I am the VP of Research and Professional Services. And I'm Danish, as you might recognize from my name. And Danes are a little different from you guys. And let me explain. First of all, Bernie Sanders talks more about us than he talks about you. And I think the reason is that, he talks a lot about the Scandinavian welfare model. It's very good in many ways. We pay a lot in taxes, but apparently it doesn't really hurt us because we are the most happy people in the world. So, anyway, how are you guys doing now?
We're happy.
You're happy? That's good. Because that's another difference between Danes and Americans. When people ask me, how are you doing? I think it's a question. It's not a greeting. So I start explaining how I'm doing. So, and I just need to understand how you're doing more than you're happy. So let me ask you a few questions. How many of you are running Net Promoter today? Please raise your hand. Cool. Please keep it up there. That's great. How many of you think you're doing a good job with Net Promoter? Yeah, then, a lot of hands dropped. Is it only you, Lou? That's amazing. I was actually going to ask a third question. How many of you can link Net Promoter to growth? I think Lou can. But that's actually what I'm going to talk about. This book that's on your table, it's worth its weight in gold. And what it does is it explains to you, as was mentioned before, how you can grow at almost twice the speed if you follow some best practices around Net Promoter. And the purpose was, and it started a couple of years ago, Adam and I, we were talking about what's actually the state of Net Promoter. And we've seen a lot of companies that come to us, and we also, just met them at conferences, etc., that said, yeah, we tried Net Promoter and it doesn't work. And we're thinking, why doesn't it work, right? We have customers who believe it works. So what's going wrong? So we set out to do some research and identify the best practices of Net Promoter. And we also wanted to find out, because this is where we thought it was really important, how does NPS really impact growth? If you've read The Ultimate Question by Fred Reichheld, you would know that there's a link. But is that really the truth? Does that apply to every company? And that's what we wanted to find out. So we did some studies, and the latest one that we have done together with the MIT Center of Information Systems Research in Boston was a lot about what are the best practices of NPS and how does that impact growth. We also asked, this was more the MIT part of it, about operational efficiency. But one of the questions we asked was, why do you do Net Promoter? And these are the answers we got. So half of all companies that we surveyed, there were a lot of them, from small companies to global international organizations, said improve the customer experience. That's why we do it. 1 out of 4 said retention, referrals, and up and cross sales. And the rest was something about measuring loyalty or improve operational efficiency. So now comes the next question to you guys, because they could only answer with one answer. What was the main reason for doing Net Promoter? which of these four is the right answer? Which one do you think? Sorry?
All of them.
All of them? Well, yes and no. You know, I like a good customer experience anytime, but you know, you can build some fantastic customer experiences if you really want to, without making money. Why don't you just give away your software for free? Right? So, I tell you one thing, this is a study from Bain & Company, they do it every second year, and one of the questions they ask is, what's your top priority next year? And every 2 years they do that, number one is always revenue growth. I think the CEOs in the room can nod to that. This is their job. They're taking care of shareholders, right? It's all about growth. For the first time ever, last time, it was customer loyalty as number 2. But customer loyalty is actually also a growth thing. Because loyal customers stay longer, they buy more, and they refer you to their friends. So the focus of the top people in your company is growth. So if I go back to what the purpose is, which one of these four do you think does most growth, creates most growth? That's the retention, the referrals, and the up and cross sales. So that's the right answer. So we did the study, and what we found was there are a number of best practices that all support growth. And we split them into 3 groups. And this is a maturity model. So you start with the first one, measure. If you don't measure, there's nothing to act on, right? So we built this model where we said, well, if you want to roll out Net Promoter, this is where you start. You need to survey your customers in some way. You need to get the feedback. You need to measure your Net Promoter score. The second thing is, and that was built into the model quite early back in I don't think Fred Reichel really talked a lot about it in his first book, but in the second version of it, and also in the book Answering the Ultimate Question, it was all about what you do with it, acting on it. And if you don't act on it, you're just wasting your time. But what we found in our study was that that's not enough, and that's the traditional Net Promoter approach. You need somehow to link that to your retention, to your up and cross sales, and your referral business. And doing that, we didn't really see anybody who provided that kind of solution. So that's became also a sort of a strategy for CustomerGauge to really offer that kind of functionality. And we call that monetized NPS. And of all the companies that we surveyed, well, how can you be on pre-measure level and claim that you do Net Promoter? That's a little weird, right? But the answer comes on the next slide, so I'll get back to that. But in fact, more than 60% were just measuring. So they were not getting very far in this journey. And the further you get, the more growth you create. So that is why a lot of companies are failing when they do Net Promoter. So let's take a look at what the best practices are. Measure. The first thing is short and frequent surveys. Who likes a long survey here? Come on, raise your hands. No, nobody, okay. But the frequency is also important. Like imagine you take the temperature of your kid once a year, and for the rest of the year you say, it's okay. My kid is fine. That doesn't work, right? So you need to ask more frequently. Now, Lou mentioned that you can't spam your customers with emails every day. So there has to be some kind of balance. But it is quite common for a lot of companies to do it 4 times a year. Now, if you have only done it once a year, Going to 4 times a year, that might take a little time because nobody likes surveys, to be honest, even the short ones. So it's about educating your customers into this. The second thing is, it's not enough to do just what is called relationship surveys. We define the relationship survey as the how likely are you to recommend the brand? That's the question, the Net Promoter question. But transactional surveys can be anything, right? Any touch point in your customer journey, you just want to measure how do we do it there. It doesn't have to be the Net Promoter question. It can just be the customer effort score. You know, how much time did you spend? How easy was it to get this fixed? High volume transactions like support issues. That's a good place where you can use other types of questions instead. So you need to do both in order to grow faster. We see some companies still that prefer paper interviews, right? You know, manual interviews. Come on, guys, this is the digital age. You need to digitalize. If you don't do that, you're just wasting resources. And the final thing, and that's what explains why some companies are on a pre-measure level, that is, you need to understand your score. You need to do driver analysis. If you don't do that, how are you going to know how to grow? How are you going to know how to improve your Net Promoter Score? Without reasons, I'm sorry, you're wasting your time. So let's look at the ACT, the second level. You know the term closing the loop, right? This is what it's called, that you get the feedback and you close the loop by going back to your clients. So if you have a detractor that says, I'm really angry because of whatever the reason is, you pick up the phone and you call that person. You close the loop in the front line. A lot of companies struggle with this because of lack of resources. But what you can do as well is that if you can't call everybody, at least send them an email explaining what you learned and what you plan to do about it. That's also closing the loop. Another thing, and that really applies to business, use the input you get when you go back to customers in meetings. We built this great tool where you can see all the scores within a company. This is the hierarchy that Lou mentioned. And you can go back and you can discuss with your customer, say, these are the scores that we got from you. And we see some of them are red. And we don't like that because we are your vendor. And we think we should improve. And if you arrange the right meeting, you're talking to the C-suite there. And the C-suite, they invested in you. So they're also interested in having a good relationship with you as a vendor. So what you can use this tool for is to actually improve your relationship. You can agree on what should you improve with the customer. This tool, I've seen this in effect many times, and I tell you it makes wonders for relationships with customers. It's really like you get on the same page. And instead of sending your customer success managers or account managers to the client to only sell, you know, pick the stuff down from the shelf. Oh, I got this one. Do you want that as well? Suddenly you're talking about the customer business, what's going well, what's not going well, and how do you improve that relationship. It's really a great tool. The second best practice on acting is doing it fast. So this is evident, right? You get feedback, you don't wait for 3 months to call up people or to take that meeting. You do that as fast as you can afterwards. If you really have a detractor, call them the same day, or at least within 48 hours. You also need to close the loop on management level. This is where a lot of companies miss out, right? This is about management buy-in. Yeah, we bought this great tool. Now our employees have some more work that they can do. Yeah, great. But if management isn't involved, they aren't finding out who are the top performers, who are the laggards, where can we improve, where are the best practices. If top management, the executive suite, aren't involved as well, continuously maintaining buy-in throughout the organization, looking at the strategic issues that may require investments, you're not closing the loop on that level as well. And finally, the acting is also about setting targets. And I've listed some KPIs here, there are more. But this is not just setting targets on NPS. It's not just growing from -17 to +13. You need to work on your response rates, something we call coverage. I'll get back to that. How many do you close the loop for? How fast do you do that? You need to track that, and you need to set targets on that. To give you an example here, if you don't close the loop at all, your retention among the companies we surveyed are dropping by 2 percentage points a year. So you can measure NPS as much as you like. If you're not closing the loop at all, you are churning customers. Now, if you start closing the loop, and if you do that for all levels, you can actually improve your retention rate by 2.3 points a year. Now, if you're a $1 billion company, that's $23 million. Do you think that can justify getting people to pick up the phone and calling customers? I think it can. I mentioned the KPI coverage. That's just to say it's not just NPS that you need to track. You all know what the response rate means, right? But coverage is, because not all companies survey all customers. So if you only survey 4 customers, I'm pretty sure you can get a response rate of 100%. I've actually seen examples of that. Hey, we have a net promoter score of 75 and a response rate of 100. Well, how many customers did you survey? 4. Oh, no, you seem to be doing fine. So coverage means how big a share of your customer base are you getting feedback from. And what we did in the study was we tried to correlate that with retention sales or up and cross sales, and with the referral business as well. How much sales do you create through referrals? And you see there is some kind of correlation here. And the reason is, if you want to upsell to customers, who do you think will buy from you? Detractors? No. Of course, promoters. So NPS is the greatest segmentation tool for marketing and sales. It's amazing. If you're not linking your Net Promoter program to your up and cross sales programs or your referral marketing programs, you're missing an opportunity here. But of course, if you don't know who your promoters are, how are you going to find out who to sell to and who not to sell to? So that's why coverage matters. You need to understand that. I usually get a question around here where people say, how do you get above 50%? Well, that takes time. But if you want to know, I'm here the rest of the day and I can tell you. So let me move on. So now we got measure and act, and how does that impact the loyalty, what I call growth parameters? Well, we have retention, up and cross sales, and referrals. And retention is like how many points do you increase retention a year? And if you do measure, it's 1 point a year. If you do act, it's all of acting, it's 2.3. So that's a difference. That's the 10 million versus the 23 million, right? With up and cross sales and referrals looks like there's actually some growth here, but I'm in research and I have to do things properly. That's the trust thing I mentioned. There's not a statistically significance here. So I can't really say that acting is doing anything good to up and cross sales or referrals. And that's why we introduced the third step, grow. So let me get to that point. What does that mean? First of all, it means putting revenue numbers, financial figures into your Net Promoter program. And I'll show you the impact of that. It means having a retention program linked to your Net Promoter program. It means having an up and cross sales program linked to your Net Promoter program. And if you have a referral marketing program, which is where you can actually grow quite a lot, that has to be linked to your NPS program as well, right? A detractor is not going to refer you. Only incentivize promoters to refer you. So let's take a look at it. I have limited time, so I can't take you through the entire system. Trishala, my colleague, she's demonstrating it down there, but she's also on stage a bit later showing you some more features, how that can look like. But let me start here, just one thing. Think of financial figures like revenue as an extra dimension to your Net Promoter program. If you put that in your program from the start, you can actually prioritize your actions. So if you can't survey all your customers upfront, start with those that are most valuable to you. If you can't close the loop for everybody, pick the ones that has the highest value, right? So that's the extra dimension. Now we have a tool called the Net Promoter SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now they're in a mix here. But the idea is you got the Net Promoter score on the horizontal axis, and you got the financial part on the vertical axis. And then you can split all your customers into these 4 quadrants. And anybody who is over there and on the top, you're making a lot of money on, but they hate your guts, right? They are threats to your bottom line. You need to rescue them. Anyone who are at the bottom, you're not making a lot of money on them. So either look at them more like there may be trends, there may be drivers that you need to fix. Alternatively, get rid of them. I had a discussion with the CEO of one of our customers who said, we're making 93% of our revenue on 2,000 out of 85,000 customers. Said, okay, maybe you should focus on those 2,000, right? And he said, well, do you want to buy the remaining 83? I said, no, thank you, but that's actually, he wanted to get rid of them if he could. So exiting customers is also possible. If they don't like you, why do you keep them? They're hurting your business. They're more difficult to serve. They talk badly about you. Get rid of them. The strengths, those are the customers you make a lot of money on and love you. And finally, you have the opportunities. They love you, but they're not paying you a lot. That's where you find growth as well. So you see, by adding financial figures to the whole system, you get a lot more information out of Net Promoter. Let's take a look at retention. Brief look. Well, one of the things is, what's the retention rate of a promoter, a passive, a detractor? How many of you know that today? May I see the hands? None of you? But that's actually quite interesting, right? Because if you know that a promoter is more likely to stay than a detractor, and you know how much the difference is in retention rate, you can calculate how much your retention rate is going to grow if you improve your Net Promoter score, just a bit. Then suddenly you have a tool that you can show to your C-suite, or the C-suite can play around with this tool themselves if they want to, basically justifying investments into Net Promoter. Really cool. So how many of you know your company's retention rate today? Hands again, please. Yeah, like 1/4 of you. Well, of all the companies we asked, 1 out of 3 didn't know it. And that actually, we were surprised by that. How can you not know your retention rate? You need to know. But we also found out what was the average retention rate across all industries, and that was 77.2%. So the average company is losing nearly 23% of their customers every year. That's quite a lot, right? That's the churn nation. But what we also saw was that in every industry, almost, in every industry there were companies that had retention rates above 95%. So if you're not up there, then some of your competitors are. You're losing business. You need to work on retention. These are just some industries. If we take a look at IT services, average Net Promoter Score 33 in the study, and average retention rate was 81%. IT and software, I guess it's hardware and software, 41 in Net Promoter Score, and the average 77%. So there's definitely room for improvement here. If you don't know your retention rate, go back home. You got work to do. All right? That's homework for you. This is not for free. You'll walk away with homework. So let's take a look again on what's the impact on if you go to the growth stage. Well, if the retention, if you link NPS with your retention program, you will actually grow by 3 points a year. So $1 billion company, $30 million a year. Now with open cross-sales and referrals, we could suddenly see the link. And this is statistically different. So suddenly, you would almost have an up-sales rate of 29% to your existing customers if you started linking NPS with your open cross-sales program. Isn't that amazing? And for the referral business, suddenly that would also grow a lot. One thing that MIT, that was the good thing about doing this with MIT, because they're smarter than we are. They challenged us and said, why don't you ask about revenue growth in general? And that's what we have here. So companies that are on the Measure Act, there was a pre-measure, and that was only slightly lower than the measure. But they grew in this year where we surveyed them, 17, by an average 10.3%. If they were acting, they were growing a little faster. But if they were on the growth stage, they were actually growing almost twice as fast as the one at the bottom. So companies not doing anything or just thinking, hey, I'm doing Net Promoter, I'm measuring, I know my Net Promoter Score, but I'm not really doing anything with it, they're missing out an opportunity here. Will this apply to your business? I don't know. We asked a lot of companies, close to 500 companies, and there was a clear pattern here. But there's only one way to find out. Does it apply to your business? That's the homework. Thank you.